I think when I was like kind of previewing like OTAs and minicamp, like that was something that I was trying to stress on. It was just like for me, like it's the rookies. I was trying to kind of come up with a list of like, oh, these are guys that need to stand out. And I started slowly realizing like, oh, these are like 90% rookies. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
because those are the guys that like you again, a Jameer Gibbs, a Jack Campbell, a Sam Laporta, and even a Brian Branch to an extent, like you drafted them relatively high. So it's
Yeah.
like, how quickly are they hitting the ground running, especially knowing that this is a team where you're going to have to earn your snaps. Like nothing
Right.
is given to anybody. Um Obviously, yeah, there's a lot of belief that like okay, Jameer Gibbs is going to have a big role. Sam Laporta absolutely is probably going to have a big role. And then it's like Jack Campbell and Brian Branch, it's like should have a or Jack should have a big role, but how quickly is it going to be like
Yeah.
earned or given to him, I guess is always the thought process that I have.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that you probably shouldn't pay too much attention to early on is where the rookies are repping, because the lines
Mhm.
have made it very clear, like you're gonna have to go earn your spot. Like you doesn't matter how good you are or how high we drafted you, you're not starting with the starters. And so Jack Campbell has been repping with the twos the entire OTAs and minicamp. Sam Laporta has been repping with the second, sometimes with the third and fourth team, a little bit with the first, during some team drills, but like early on, repping with like the second, third, and fourth team. Same with Jameer Gibbs. He wasn't given that spot right away, especially when Dave Montgomery was healthy. So rep, I make note of rep order because it's just where
Mhm.
things stand, but just realize that that sort of stuff changes in a hurry once the pads come on, especially with the young players. So even one of the most interesting ones so far for me is that Covington is still repping with the starters, despite the fact that now to as of today, Isaiah Buggs is back in the building, and I wonder if that's another like that's a seniority thing. Like Isaiah Buggs,
Mm.
he's been a starter for a couple years here, but Covington is the oldest defender on the roster. Maybe it's just like let the 29-year-old take some first team reps and show you how it's done. It's interesting, but I don't know if it's going to reflect how things are going to look in week one.
Speaking of which, that's one player, Covington specifically, like, when
Yeah,
the Lions signed him, I was like, "Oh, that's like, dude's probably not gonna make it out of camp," but, like, it sounds like he is getting, like, lots of opportunities and he's getting
yeah.
lots of looks, with this defense. Is there anybody else that, like, you kind of, like, have observed and just like, "Oh, well, that person's getting a few more opportunities than I thought they would?" Whether it's with a different position, like you said, whether it's with, like, the ones or
Yeah.
something of that nature.
I mean, I guess you could say that oh god, why am I forgetting his name? The center Pierschbacher. The fact
Okay,
that
yeah,
Pierschbacher is getting the first team center reps, like it's not a surprise to me that they're like Frank, take as much time as you need. But
sure.
I guess to me, it's maybe a little bit surprising that they aren't just like, all right, Graham, you're going to be center for now, and then we'll figure out the right guard. We'll rotate guys at right guard, whoever it is
Yeah, that is
with
actually
Vitae.
really interesting. Yeah, like, now that you mention it, like, you would
Yeah,
think that Graham would be first up for
right.
center reps.
Yeah, and listen, I'm not. I think that it's good for Pierschbacher and it's a good route for him to potentially make the roster. And I don't think this necessarily means Graham is in trouble at all. I think part of it might be like Graham, we want you in that right guard conversation, like starter
Mhm.
conversation. Once we get into training camp, like we want to make sure that you've got as many reps as possible at that position before we even get to training camp. Vitae, I mean, they're still limiting his reps too, right? So maybe there's a small worry that he's not going to be ready for the beginning of the season. Like to me, it feels like they're covering their bases at right guard more so than they're like, wow, Pierschbacher is beating out Graham Glasgow at center. I think they're keeping Graham fresh. Like he's also getting a fair amount of reps at center, but it's really been mostly Pierschbacher. So that's been a little bit surprising to me. I don't know if there's anyone necessarily on defense. Trying to think. Like maybe it's a little bit surprising that Charles Harris has kind of been the guy. Charles Harris and Romeo Quar have both been kind of the starting guy opposite Aiden Hutchinson. Part of that might just be because Kaminsky's dealing with a little bit of an injury. I imagine. I'm guessing since he
Okay.
hasn't been a full participant in the past two practices we've seen. But other than that, I guess Derek Barnes, right? Like that one is definitely a little bit
Yeah.
surprising that he's repping with the first team. I know part of that has to do with Jack Campbell. They want to get him second team Mike reps while they're continuing to give Alex Anzalone Mike reps. But the fact that he was there before Rodrigo got hurt instead of Rodrigo was noteworthy. And again, that might just be a seniority thing. Going back to that, like we've had Derek Barnes around for one more year than Alex or than Rodrigo, so maybe that's what they were doing. But I think some of the hype on Derek Barnes might be real. I think they are very pleased with him, and Alex Anzalone thinks he's a completely different player than when he walked in the building. So yeah, those are kind of my like interesting standouts that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, I was gonna say Derek Barnes was the one that like definitely caught my eye because
Yeah,
again, after the drafting of Jack Campbell, I kind of looked at that linebacker room and was like, I don't know who kind of sticks around because Derek kind of seems like the odd man out where
yeah,
if Rodrigo really is outplaying him, I don't know how much special teams versatility Derek Barnes has. And then they
right,
just back, Jalen Reeves-Maybin, who is absolutely going to play special teams. So it's
right.
like where does Derek Barnes fit? And now to kind of see him, getting those reps, obviously, yes, in OTAs, but not just getting those reps, but also seeming to make an impact at least or an impression on the media as well as his teammates. It's like, well, maybe he's really has like turned the corner, in year three here, um, as a linebacker.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to read between the lines too, because linebacker play is also kind of tough to really figure out during OTAs, because really all you can tell is okay, how are they dropping into coverage and doing that? And I wouldn't say that Derek Barnes has stood out in the good or the bad for that reason. But it's also like, are they just giving him an opportunity to win a spot? Like, are they just saying, okay, we're not sure whether you're going to make the team or not. Let's put you with the first team during OTAs and see how you do. Like
Yeah.
it could be as simple as that too. So again, you don't want to read too much into the order of things, but it's interesting. It's interesting to make a note of in OTAs and then see where things are at in the summer when training camp rolls around.
I think the other thing I'm noticing too with this, or at least from myself, is like when I'm reading this and I'm getting excited for Derek Barnes, possibly getting this opportunity. It's like, but it does come at the cost of probably Malcolm maybe not getting as many opportunities.
Right.
And I think I had that moment of clarity is like, is this team probably is a lot deeper
Yeah.
than I'm realizing. Like
Right.
there's guys that you liked maybe a season ago, like are now going to be in the fight of their life for maybe maybe not a roster spot per se, but
Right.
for meaningful snaps
Yeah. I
in
mean,
2023.
I would say, I mean, Khalif Raymond is a guy who's going to continue to be a significant role, like not necessarily starter, but a significant role guy. But he's kind of one of those two where it's just like, okay, you're quietly getting pushed down and down the depth chart, and it's like, oh, part of you's like, oh man, Khalif's such a great story. Like I mean,
Mhm.
coming off a second team All Pro as a punt returner, like man, that's a bummer that he's getting pushed down and he's not going to contribute just as much. And then yeah, you have that moment of realization, like, no, that's a great thing. Like that, like
Yeah.
maybe I feel bad for the individual, but if he's wide receiver 5 or 6 on this team, like, dang, we're doing a pretty darn good job. You got to feel pretty good about that. So yeah, I think I've had that same realization at points. Like like I think Jerry Jacobs, like an absolute fan favorite. People love this guy.
Mhm.
Fantastic story. Good football player. Tenacious player. Smart player. He might be CB3. He might be coming off the bench. He might not play a lot this year if Emmanuel Mosley comes in and play and balls out once he's back from the ACL. And again, sucks for a fan favorite, but really, really good for the team if you can feel that confident in the guy coming off the bench when last year you really weren't confident in anyone in that room outside of Jerry Jacobs. So
Yeah.
that's yeah, sign of progress and something that you should be excited about, not necessarily pouting about.
Jerry Jacobs is an interesting mention too. I actually have plans to do like a video in a couple days of just like a couple lines players that I think are being like overlooked, but that could actually end up having big roles.
Mm-hmm.
And spoiler alert for my audience, like Jerry's pretty high up on that list of people that are probably being overlooked. So again, we talked briefly about you kind of gave a couple guys on that you weren't expecting to kind of stand out.
Mm-hmm.
But is there anybody that like I guess that's a little more like established that is like really like catching your eye, like, whoa, like that's you know, that person's really kind of taking command in their position group or
Yeah.
just in team situations that you're just like I knew they would be good, but they're much better than I thought they were going to be
Yeah.
this early in OTAs.
I'll give you one on each side of the ball, and the first one will go defense is CJ Gardner Johnson, and today was a perfect example. Like that guy just took over practice. Uh,
Mm,
he's a guy who obviously like plays a whole bunch of different positions, and we're seeing that at practice. He's playing safety, he's playing nickel, he's playing really close to the line, he's playing off the line, and man, like the swagger of that secondary, they promised it was coming, and it's coming, and you never it's that balance of like, are the wide receivers disappointing or is the secondary really good? And I'm sure the
Yeah,
answer is somewhere in the middle. But man, like they have just been ball hawks all off season so far. And I know I've only seen 4 practices, but I mean the passes broken up have been 10 times what we've seen. I would say at this point last season, and so he's leading the charge there. Like you can really see the confidence. Everything comes so naturally for him. It doesn't ever look like he's fighting. It's just like he's moving smoothly. He knows where he needs to be. He's communicating to other people, and I think that's the thing too. Is Lions offense, ton of like pre-snap motion. They
sure.
won a lot last year doing that sort of thing, and that's just kind of become in vogue in the NFL. Is that pre-snap motion as a way of getting defensive backs moving and mixing up their coverages, causing communications. That has been completely on point, especially with the starters. And I
Mm,
think CJ Gardner Johnson has a huge part in that because they're very loud, they're very communicative. Now, obviously, this is happening without 70,000 people screaming in the stadium. So we'll see
sure.
how that translates when, the regular season comes and all that sort of stuff. But to me, it's very impressive how commanding he has become in that secondary and how that has trickled down to basically everyone else in that secondary. So I'd say he's been the standout on defense. Offensively, I said before in the show, like what you need to pay attention to when you're looking at all these OTA notes is consistency.
Mhm.
Guy appears on your notes every single day. That guy has been Sam Laporta. I mean, I hate to overhype a rookie tight end because I know all the pitfalls of rookie tight ends in their first year, man. But that guy
Sure.
just continually dominating everyone. And yes, he's still mostly repping with the second and third team, but he's starting to work his way into that first team conversation a little bit. And he hasn't slowed down, man. Like Jared Goff was kind of gushing about him today. It's the quickness, he looks like a wide receiver out there. It's the strong hands, it's everything, man. He looks like the full package. And I don't know. If you would have told me a month ago saying like you'd be thinking this guy might have 600, 700 yards under his belt in his rookie season, I'd be like, Jeremy, you're being crazy. You're living up to the offseason hype. Like this is not what happens with rookie tight ends. They're in the 300 to 500 range typically. I don't know. I'm starting to believe that he's going to have a much quicker impact and a much bigger impact than I expected.